Let the sound speak a little, you know you're delicate to retract your claws. A relief, but part of me can't help but like it when you sink in your teeth. It's the cause and effect of an invisible rent that collects in the bottom of your neck. I don't need any room to breathe, but see, please, please, please celebrate summer in your winter days. When we misbehave, the kind of man is swimming in my veins.
Okay, everybody, we're ready to go. Welcome to PCC. My name is Gary Gadini. I'm the lead pastor here, and I want to invite you to silence your phones or smartphones or electronic devices. It'll help the evening go well. We are so glad you're here. You need to know about 15 years ago, as a church community, we made a decision to shift our focus from growing a great church to coming alongside and helping develop a great city. And in that vein, it's our honor to host tonight and to invite this forum. As a 21-year resident of Peninsula Covenant Church, along with my wife, having 5 daughters, we've personally participated in a rapid growth plan for Redwood City. We've raised 3 of our daughters are out of the house, 2 are still here, and having raised 5 daughters in this city, we love this city. And that's what gathers us here tonight. We have great men and women who want to serve our city. We have a concerned citizenry who wants to hear from them. And we're honored to host this for this very reason. In an increasingly charged, partisan political environment, we hope that tonight we can experience a respectful forum that collectively engages the pressing issues so we can learn from a current and next generation of political leaders and how they might address them. So I want to introduce our moderator, Brian Jaffe. Many of you know Brian as Brian from VOCA. If, like me, you're on the VOCA platform and you receive his weekly text messages about local issues. Brian's a Redwood City resident. He started VOCA last year to address what he saw as a growing gap between local government and everyday people like you and like me. Since then, he's seen 1,500 Redwood City residents jump on the VOCA platform, and over 20,000 opinions on dozens of local issues have been shared with the city council through the platform. Here's what I learned about Brian. We met, I guess, a year ago. I walked into a Starbucks downtown, and Steve Penna was meeting with Brian, and Steve said, "You got to meet this guy." And whatever Steve says, I do. And so that started a friendship. He has a deep and long-time commitment to public service. In college, Brian volunteered in the United States Senate as an intern in Washington, D.C. Brian served 5 years in the United States Navy, having been deployed into Japan and the Middle East. Thank you, Brian. And after moving to Redwood City, Brian looked for ways to get involved locally, serving on the city council appointee, as a city council appointee in the El Camino Real Citizen Advisory Group. I found in our one-on-one interactions that Brian speaks passionately about the need for an engaged citizenry in a strong local democracy, which is something I also believe in very strongly. So when Brian asked if PCC would host this forum, we just said absolutely. It's an honor. So without any further ado, would you please welcome Brian Jaffe.
Good evening. Thank you, Gary, for the very kind introduction, and welcome all to the first ever VOCA Redwood City Candidate Forum. Before we get started this evening, I would like to thank the many people who've helped to make tonight's event possible. First off, thank you, Peninsula Covenant Church. Gary, Greg, Aubrey, Dane, Daisy, Ed, Nick, Kristen, and anyone else I've forgotten, your warm embrace of this event has taken it from an idea to a reality. Second, to my volunteers, Elise in the back helping with the live stream, and Tom here at my side, thank you. Third, to all the VOCA users, thank you for taking a risk with me and with each other to build a community here in Redwood City that wants government to be more accessible and more accountable. Many of you here in the audience and many more I know watching the live stream at home, Your civic engagement is what keeps our community strong. And finally, thank you to the candidates. I can hardly think of a more exposing thing to do than to run for local office. One day you're a private citizen living your own private life, and the next you're knocking on people's doors, asking them for support, subjecting yourselves to any question from any angle at any time. These 7 candidates have been crisscrossing town, going to picnics, meet and greets, forums, and festivals, and they're doing it because they care about Redwood City. Thank you all for joining us tonight to share your vision with our city and to take our questions. VOCA's mission is to strengthen democracy by simplifying and expanding civic participation. We do this weekly with text message polls, and we're also doing it here tonight. All of the questions I am about to ask have come from topics you, the residents of Redwood City, have requested to be raised with the candidates. As I've mentioned, we're streaming this live and offering it for replay online. So even if you're busy getting a toddler into bed right now, or waking up for a night shift at the hospital, you can fully participate in this event and in this election. And finally, speaking of the election, ballots are being mailed out to each of you starting today. You should find your ballot in your mailbox by the end of the week. Please take the time to vote and encourage your family members, friends, and neighbors to vote. Even get a bit pushy if you need to, because voting is the most important way to keep our democracy strong. Okay, let's get started. The format for this event will be as follows. Each candidate will start by giving a 1-minute opening statement. Next, we will get to the questions. Each question will be addressed to a specific candidate who will have 2 minutes to respond. Afterwards, we will open the floor to other candidates who would like to follow up with comments of their own on the same topic. Just like at a city council meeting, brevity and directness are appreciated during follow-up, with a maximum time of 1 minute for follow-up comments. Once everyone who wishes to speak on a given topic has had a chance, we'll move on to the next question. After about an hour of questions, we will close with each candidate giving a 90-second closing statement. Now for opening statements by random draw, Diane Howard, you are first.
Thank you. Is the microphone where it's supposed to be, and don't touch it?
Yeah, I think if you just speak it, pick it up.
Thank you. My name is Diane Howard. I've been an elected official for almost 20 years, and I'm currently serving as your vice mayor. While on council, I helped spearhead the creation of Courthouse Square, City Hall, our retail cinema project, a new library, 2 new libraries, 1 fire station, and multiple parks and playgrounds. On my watch, Redwood City has become the most vibrant city on the peninsula. But with success come great challenges. The need for more affordable housing, challenges with transportation and parking, and we have an unfunded pension liability we have a legal obligation to pay down. Why am I running? Because by the year 2020, we will have at least 5 new council members over a period of 5 years. And with that is their steep learning curve. My years of service, my depth of experience, and a deep understanding of my community will be critical during this time of change and transition. I humbly ask for your support. Thank you.
Zell Hale. So I would ask that the audience just holds applause because that will let us get to more questions, but we'll have a great opportunity at the end to thank all the candidates.
And can we hear me here too? Or do we need to move the microphone? You can hear me? Great. So Redwood City is the place where my husband and I bought our first home together. It's where I became a mom to 2 beautiful little girls. And where someday, when I'm long gone and they're old and gray, they'll talk about this place, their hometown of Redwood City. And that's incredibly special to me. This community has given us so much, and I am inspired to give back. But before I share with you my vision for the future, I want to tell you a little bit about my past. I was raised by a single mom, and we struggled to get by. Meanwhile, my husband was in and out of foster care with his family's struggles with poverty. We could have been left behind had it not been for the extended community that cared for us. Today in Redwood City, I see people being left behind, and I want to reach out the same helping hand that I was given so many years ago. And that's my vision for Redwood City, a place where people of all ages, all backgrounds, and all income levels can come together and thrive. So I'm excited to work on the issues that matter to Redwood City residents, like housing and affordability, reducing our time spent in traffic, advocating for great schools, and protecting the neighborhoods that we hold dear. I look forward to tonight's discussion, and I humbly ask for your support in November. Thank you.
All right, Christina, you're next.
Great, thank you, Brian. I'm Christina Umhofer, and I'll be more candid in my opening statement. So my mother left my father when I was a year old. I was raised by a resourceful, strong woman who landed very quickly in an apartment complex with 2 other single moms. While we faced many hardships, we had each other and formed a supportive micro-community until one day my life came to a painful crossroad. One faced by hundreds in this community almost every day. Our family was evicted. Being raised by a single mom did not define me, but changed my perspective about the world and my sense of security I felt while living in an apartment on Hudson Street. I've never forgotten what it felt to be torn away from the community that I had given so much, that had given me so much. As an adult, I was blessed to own and subsequently sell an apartment building in Redwood City, a building that was very similar to the one I grew up in. When we wanted to sell, I made sure that we sold to a nonprofit to keep our tenants in their home and in their community. Regardless of what the outcome is in this election, my heart is in Redwood City. My heart is with the community, and my heart will always be here. The sense of support, love, and community that I experienced at a young age here in Redwood City is what I will protect to keep as our community, as our city continues to grow. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Jason, you are next.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. I grew up here in Redwood City. I'm a product of local Redwood City schools, and I grew up here at a time when it was affordable for my dad, who's a public school teacher, and my mom, who's a real estate appraiser, to be able to buy a home and raise a family and give us an incredible life, which we had here in Redwood City. And I learned very early on in my life that giving back to your community is just what we do here in Redwood City. And it's those values that made me decide to want to pursue a life of public service. I work full-time in the civic space and have worked in local government for almost 10 years. Currently work at Stanford University in the Office of Community Relations, where I focus on building housing for our faculty, staff, and our students. And I want to take what I've learned there through the land use approvals process and apply it to our hometown to solve some of our most vexing challenges. I have a vision for a community where we have housing that's affordable, where we can get around town safely and efficiently, where we have high-achieving schools and where our small businesses can thrive. In order to achieve that vision, I need your help, and I humbly ask for your support in November. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Diana, you're next.
I'm Diana Reddy, and I'm a lifelong resident of Redwood City. My working career was with the Sequoia Union High School District, where I advocated for children, parents, and staff. I served twice as co-chair for what is now called Faith in Action. My team literally saved the health plan of San Mateo, the agency that administers Medi-Cal services for residents in San Mateo County, and we gave shape to HEART, the Housing Endowment and Regional Trust that has built hundreds of affordable homes in San Mateo County. 5 years ago, I founded Fair Rents for Redwood City to respond to the massive displacement and housing insecurity of low and middle income residents in our community. My life has always been in public service. I've talked with residents throughout Redwood City who believe they have not been heard. I'm a community organizer, and I'm committed to seeking community involvement before major decisions are made in the future.
Thank you. Rick, you're next.
Okay. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Brian, for organizing this. My name is Rick Hunter, and my wife, Naomi, and I moved to Redwood City 21 years ago when our 3 sons were just toddlers. They're now young adults. Little did we know then how much we would come to love Redwood City. Once our children started school, we began to get very involved. I served many roles at our children's schools, managed Little League, created a youth running program, and was a leader in several school parcel tax and bond campaigns. And then I got involved serving on several boards of some wonderful local nonprofits. The first was the Sequoia YMCA, and then I was many years as the treasurer and board member of the Redwood City Education Foundation, and finally the Redwood City Parks and Arts Foundation. That service led me to apply to be on the city's Parks and Recreation Commission, and then on the Planning Commission. Professionally, just to finish my background here, professionally I have an MBA in finance from UCLA, and I've been a CPA for most of my career. I left the corporate finance world a few years ago, and I now have my own small tax practice.
Thank you. And Ernie?
Thank you, and thank you all for coming, and thank you, VOCA, and also the Peninsula Covenant Church for hosting this very important event. This is obviously going to make you extremely informed about all the candidates. I'm running because I believe our community needs to be heard. And in the past couple of months, walking our neighborhoods and talking with you, many of you have confirmed that you feel that you have indeed lost your voice, and that outside interest groups have been the voice of Redwood City. And if you give me the opportunity to serve you on this council, I promise you I will work tirelessly to restore that voice. As an active member of this community, I believe that Redwood City can always be a city where everyone can succeed. I am proud of my record, and I'm ready to wake up every day fighting for our community, fighting for Redwood City, and fighting for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all the candidates for your very thoughtful opening statements. One point of order, my colleague Tom here is very polite, and he's not going to cut you off or throw tomatoes at you, but I really would encourage you when he raises the red time's up sign to wrap it up so we can get to as many questions as possible. Thank you. All right, and now into the meat of the discussion, the questions. Diane, the first question is for you, and it is about traffic. If you ask residents to name their #1 daily frustration related to local government, many will talk about traffic. This problem has not developed overnight, but it has certainly gotten worse over the 19 years you've served on City Council. What have you done over your past term to improve traffic in Redwood City, and what would you champion over the next 4 years to improve traffic if reelected?
Thank you. I think next to housing, traffic is the #1 concern in this community. And as I said, with success come challenges, and that certainly is a big challenge. Before I left the council in 2007 and 8 and 9, I started a shuttle with our Traffic Congestion Relief Alliance. And it was a shuttle that was mainly designed to go down the Broadway corridor, back and forth, picking up not only workers but people in the community and taking them to Sequoia Station's train station and back home. It was a pilot program. We got started. We were very proud of it. It was named by our now mayor, Ian Bain, called the Climate Best Express. And unfortunately, it ran out of funding and was not started again. But however, when I got back on council, I feel so strongly about transportation. I lobbied hard to do a citywide transportation study. And we are about to present the results of that study very shortly. And in it will include the planning of a future shuttle throughout the community that we are going to work to find funding for, because I believe people will get out of their cars and they will travel around this community if they are given an easy, seamless way to do it. And I will be working very hard in that area. Another area I'm working very diligently on is ferry service. We have people coming in and out of our community for either going to work or coming here for their job, and they're using the bridges. Well, what we're working on, we took the first step in funding a feasibility study to study having a ferry service go north-south to San Francisco and east-west over to Oakland, hopefully taking multiple cars off the bridges and put people on the boats, which they would totally enjoy. So there are two areas I'm working on, and I continue to work on transportation issues because it's vital in Redwood City that we be able to move around safely. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. I'm now going to open it to other candidates who would like to discuss traffic. By a show of hands, Jason.
I really agree with something that the Vice Mayor said, that it's possible that some residents of our city can get out of their cars. It's not possible for everyone. I grew up in the hills. I can't imagine biking to work every single day from there. But where I live now, I live close to an arterial street. That's very easy to bike along, and I think we can build on that success. And here in Redwood City, we actually have proven that this can work, because 46% of our downtown residents don't drive alone to work. And that was something that we found through the citywide transportation plan, which, as the Vice Chair of the Complete Streets Advisory Committee, I was really proud to help shape. But looking forward, we need to, I think, get creative. I certainly agree with ferry service. We need to get Dumbarton Rail project completed. I'd even like to see a self-driving shuttle be introduced. We have one in San Ramon, and I think Redwood City would be a great candidate for one as well. We also need to complete some key intersection improvements like the Woodside 101 interchange, and we also need to complete grade separation at Caltrain. Thank you.
Thank you. Giselle?
Thank you. It's so awkward looking this way.
You can speak to the
Okay,
audience.
great. So first of all, I want to say thank you for the question to VOCA members and to Brian, because we have talked a lot, and I think this is probably our 5th forum now, about housing, but we haven't talked as much about transit, and I would agree. Time and again, at the doors, people are really concerned about that time they spend in traffic, and it's time away from the people they love and the things they love to do. And traffic is interesting because we have a booming economy and an aging infrastructure, which is, of course, the perfect equation for the traffic we experience today. I want to shine a light on one additional topic on this, which is fare equity and transit equity. You know, we spend a lot of time talking about affordable housing, but you also need affordable transit to be a part of the solution. You know, today, Caltrain gives its deepest discounts to large employers when they could be giving them to small businesses and to service workers. And so transit equity and reform is something that I'm personally very passionate about. I was also very fortunate to work as a planning commissioner on the Redwood City Moves, RWC Moves transit plan. And another passion project of mine there is also, I will stop there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm gonna respect
Ernie?
the sign. Thank you.
So, just piggybacking on what Diane Howard had said, shuttle services is going to be an integral part of trying to bring something in to try to alleviate the traffic. As a planning commissioner, when you're approving these projects and you're seeing the amount of additional people that are coming into Redwood City, I heard Mayor Ian Bain said at one time we have an excess of 50,000 people coming in during a workday. That's a lot of people. And obviously part of the problem is that we need to get people, especially coming in either from San Francisco or the East Bay where they're coming from, and trying to incentivize them and trying to make it more attractive for them to take public transit into Redwood City. But trust me, when I'm walking the neighborhoods and I'm talking to you, I do hear the concerns, especially when you have so many cars on the road, about the farm hill diet. I mean, that's a main concern that everybody's feeling. The humps and the bumps on the road, and cars coming in through your neighborhoods, and or Google or Facebook buses coming in through the neighborhoods to try to get them to work. This is all happening and something that we can definitely work on.
Thank you. Rick?
I think that a lot of the ideas that Vice Mayor Howard and Jason and others have said are excellent. Ferry, have a shuttle service beginning and ending around downtown, around the Caltrain station would be wonderful. I just wanted to point out a couple, and the grade separation projects that Jason mentioned are going to be critical when Caltrain becomes electrified and there's 3 times as many trains running now. We can't have that gate down 75% of the time on Whipple. I want to just bring a couple other things that when developers are proposing new projects that's going to either residential or commercial that's going to bring traffic into the area, I want to look at transportation impact fees, which would be assessed based on the number of new vehicle trips that their project would generate. And also I want to require those new developers to have transportation demand management programs, which would require the tenants in those projects to create a fewer number of trips.
Thank you. Diana?
We need to move Tom right there. So this is really a great format because we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time someone speaks. I did want to add to the transit equity conversation that our children who are coming to school on buses, and not school buses, but they're coming to school on Samtrans buses. And low-income families are sometimes making choices between sending their kids to school or eating or other choices. They're not, so when they're missing school, it's not necessarily because they're sick. Some days it's because they can't afford a bus pass. So it's something for our caring community to be aware of, and it's something that I would like to address.
Thank you. Christina.
Yeah, so we focus a lot on what they call TOD, transit-oriented development, which is essentially the apartments near development, near transit. And what I would like to see is actually more of what they call a TOC, a transit-oriented community. And if we work with our Samtrans and change that schedule a little bit and look at their routes and work more east to west as opposed to north to south, we can turn Woodside Plaza into transit-oriented community, Marsh Manor into transit-oriented community, Edgewood, Canyon Park, did I say Roosevelt Plaza? Roosevelt Plaza. So we can turn these into transit-oriented communities very easily with the infrastructure that we have in place. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for answering this question. I'm going to move now to the next question, and it is, Giselle, this is for you, and the topic is campaign finance. According to Climate Magazine, you have raised considerably more money for your city council campaign than other candidates, up to 3 times more than some on stage with you tonight. How do you respond to the perception some people have that well-funded candidates are beholden to campaign contributors more than to the general public?
Great, thank you for the question, Brian. So I started this campaign the way I would any project, which is I built a budget. Once I decided I was running, I said, okay, what will I need to raise in order to run this campaign? That turned out to be a more difficult question to answer than I thought, and here's why. This race is generally held on odd years, and in those years, a smaller percentage of the population votes, typically around 5,000 voters. The last time this election was held on an even year, as it is this year because of a Senate Bill 415, it carried about 12,000 votes for the winning candidates, and it's expected to be significantly higher this cycle. So there is your triple figure right there, and I started with that as my baseline. And I don't know about the rest of the candidates, but I had never raised money before. It's an incredibly daunting part of this experience. And I was overwhelmed by the support of the community. I am very proud to say that I have the strongest funds raised from Redwood City residents and businesses. I have raised 40% of my dollars have come from Redwood City donors and businesses, and 60% have come from San Mateo County. And of course, we are San Mateo County's living room. I'm very happy that people come here to spend their tax dollars to eat in our restaurants and to watch our movies. And then a note on what you get when you make a campaign contribution. You know, in my experience, it's really about an endorsement of your values and your candidacy and your viability as a candidate. So I'm encouraged to have gotten such strong support. Endorsements are part of this process as well. And if I can share a story, I was sitting down with a very important elected official who was opposed to SAMCAR, one of the organizations who had just endorsed me and given me a donation. And we talked about it. And I said, you know, this is where I stand on these issues. This is where she stood. And she decided to endorse me, even though she didn't agree with this organization. And it was because we agreed that we could work together. There was important work to be done. She gave me a great idea around affordable housing, and that's now become a part of my housing platform. And so that's what I think we can do. We can work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other takers on this topic? Jason, I'll ask you because you've also raised considerable amounts of money.
No, that's okay.
How do you address people's concerns about candidates being too close to contributors' interests?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I agree with Giselle that when someone gives you a campaign contribution, it's an endorsement of your values. I laid out a vision for what I would like to see for the future of my hometown. And that is one in which we can have homes that are affordable, where we can get around town and have great small businesses here in Redwood City. That requires a campaign to be achieved. And it is a similar endorsement of that vision. People are stakeholders in our community as well. And when they invest in me, they're investing in the vision for Redwood City and the values that I bring to the table. I am proud that I am still able to be completely independent when making decisions at the City Council. One of my contributors I've actually gone toe-to-toe with before at the dais. I stood in public comment and said I advocated for renter protections in Redwood City in the form of minimum lease terms and relocation assistance. And they recognized that, and I was very upfront about that when I sought their support. But what I'm proud to be able to do is say, you can be open about where you disagree, but we want to have a productive conversation and work across those disagreements.
Thank you. Diana, you had your hand up.
Well, I think it's important to note that, and I appreciate the lifting up of the word values, because one of the decisions that we made in my campaign, and I do use the term we when I'm talking about our campaign, because I believe that I'm standing here as a voice of the community, and if I'm elected, I will be bringing the community's seat to the table. But we made a decision not to take any corporate or developer money. And the vast majority of our donations are under $100. And so I'm very proud of the fact that we based our campaign not on the money that we raised, but on the people that supported our campaign. And we're running a very successful campaign without a great deal of money.
Thank you. Christina?
Piggyback here on Diana's comment. So I'm a small business owner. My husband, we just retired our business after a lot of years, 58 years total as a second generation family business. As an auto repair shop, we saw a lot of ebbs and flows in our business. And actually the surprisingly enough, the high time for us is when the economy was dropping and not a lot of people can afford new cars or to lease new cars. So when the economy would pick back up, we had to figure out ways. We had a budget in order to make our payroll. We had a budget to make our insurance payments, which was about $10,000 a month for a small business. And so I fully understand what a budget is. And what I actually did was take what it was going to cost for lawn signs and mailers and door hangers and postcards, t-shirts, and I worked myself back. And it was really only $15,000 that I was going to need. And that was my goal, and that's what I did, and I don't want to ask the city of Redwood City for anything more, and I haven't.
Thank you. Diane?
Thank you. I have to say I do have concerns about the cost of an election. My concern is greatest in the fact that I think it may discourage people in the future to run for public office because it costs so much money. So what I am encouraged about is the televised as well as the open forums. In my years of service, we have never had so many candidates forums and open opportunities to speak with people. And on the upside of that is you don't have to spend money. Thankfully, you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart, and we're able to talk to you, and people are able to watch us, whether in person or at home. And I think that more of this will probably encourage more people to get involved, because the money will come down, I'm hoping, in the future when we offer these kinds of opportunities.
Ernie?
So we do need campaign finance reform. You know Redwood City has hit the big time when you've got that much money being raised. And there's a couple of things happening here, and you can listen to it through the community. Number one, you do discourage people who want to run for office and who are qualified and who have a passion for serving their community. But when they see the daunting numbers on that 460, they just think, oh my God, how the heck am I going to raise that amount of money? Plus the media as well gets involved. Media puts it out there like there's no tomorrow, and and who's raised the most money, and then automatically people think, well, this person raised the most money, so they're automatically going to win. thus then sending a message to the voters, well, why should I vote if this person's automatically going to win? That's why it's very important that you guys get out there and vote and let the people know who you want to serve. And we do need to send a strong message that we need to pull back on the finances a bit.
Thank you. Rick?
Yeah, I want to echo what my friend Ernie just said. And I think we do need to look at instituting some campaign spending limits. I don't know what that would be, but several of our local communities, other local communities in the county, do have campaign spending limits, and I think that would put everybody on a much more even foot, and it would enable lower income people who can't put in their own funds to be more likely to enter a race.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to the next question, and it is for you, Christina, and the topic is rising rents. You have spoken in the past about how you do not support rent control, and how, as a landlord yourself, you've chosen to maintain below-market rents that you believe are equitable for your tenants. This is very admirable of you, but do you believe relying on landlords to be equally kind-hearted is a realistic citywide strategy to address affordable housing? What else, if anything, would you do if elected to help those facing rising rents?
Great question. So yes, I am a little bit of an anomaly where we bought our property in 94, 95 and it was at a cheap enough rate where we were able to keep our rents down, right? The property tax is less. So just mathematically we were able to do so. So we're fortunate in that. And there are a lot of other property owners in Redwood City that do the same. So I'm not alone. We just need to reach out to them a little bit more as we move forward. So I am not for rent control. It's a Band-Aid fix, and I am not one who enjoys Band-Aid fixes. I don't like repeating things. 3 times is my magic number before my patience runs out. And I just see that this is it would be a constant. And so what I would like to do is really work with more, we don't need an ordinance, but if we educate our property owners and our real estate professionals and come up with a hybrid approach to our lease, where you take your commercial lease and your residential lease and you make that a hybrid. So, and I'll give you an example. So usually commercial leases are say a 5-year term with 2 5-year extensions, and there's built-in rental increases in those leases. Now, if we did that with our single-family homes or our multifamily residences, and we did a 2-year, with 2-year options, two 2-year options, that now gives that property owner from 0 to 6 years as having a tenant with built-in increases. Number one. Number two, you can also have an opt-out with that. You can go back to the standard 1-year lease. And if we're a little bit more transient, we can also have a secondary opt-out of a month-to-month. And that would provide a lot of leeway for not only the tenants, but also our property owners.
Thank you. Ernie?
So when I was serving on the Maple Shelter Support Committee, one of the things that we were doing at that time is we were reaching out not only to landlords in Redwood City, but landlords throughout the county of San Mateo that were willing to keep their rents at an affordable rate. They're out there. There's landlords and owners of properties who purchased their properties in the 60s, 70s, 80s, who are more than willing to charge an affordable rate. Now, obviously, it's distinctive if you get a new homeowner, a new property owner who buys an apartment building for a heck of a lot more than it was worth in the 70s and 80s. It's sometimes difficult to pencil out for them to provide such an affordable rate at times. But there are landlords out there throughout the county. It doesn't have to be all in Redwood City. And I propose that we set up a committee within our council and get community members who are passionate about that and be able to do the same thing and reach out to all of these landlords.
Thank you. Giselle?
So this week, the Mercury News reported that in the Bay Area, 1 out of every 3 renters has not saved more than $1,000. That means if there is an emergency, these individuals could be victims to eviction. And we know eviction leads to homelessness. And this is a big contributor to why we are seeing homelessness on the rise Bay Area wide and now here in Redwood City. So I think we need to act with some urgency here. I propose that we take 20% of our current housing impact fees and use it for a rainy day fund to help people stay in their homes today. But then we also need to take a portfolio approach to addressing the long-term solutions, and it should involve three things. Renter protections, which I'm a supporter of, what was recently passed, continuing to evolve those. Second, protecting our existing housing supply of affordable housing. And third, adding to our affordable housing stock.
Thank you. Jason?
There was a study that was done that found that in the Bay Area, 60%, many renters are spending 60% of their entire income on housing and on transportation costs. This is simply not sustainable for the future of our community. We're finding that our teachers can't afford to be here, our firefighters, our police officers. If I were to be elected, I'd be the only renter on the city council. So ensuring that we have sufficient housing affordability here in Redwood City is a top concern of mine. And we have to look at the reason why housing is so unaffordable in the first place. It's because we have a shortage as compared to the demand. We've created 17 jobs for every one housing unit that we've produced since 2015. The Vice Mayor cites that quite a lot. And if we can't meet that demand, the housing prices are going to continue to be out of control. So the question is, where do we put it? And how do we add it in a way that respects the community character and manages its impacts?
Thank you. Rick?
I think this question has now become the affordable housing question, it sounds like. So there are a few things. I completely agree with what the City Council did last year, which is to increase renter protections through increased one-year guaranteed lease terms and relocation assistance. We definitely do need to increase supply of housing at all income levels, not just below market subsidized, but for working class and for middle income families also. I think maybe the elephant in the room is the jobs housing imbalance, and Jason just did mention that, but that is what, in my mind, causes the gentrification, the displacement of families to have to move many, many miles away from their jobs and from their friends. We have created too many jobs for the number of houses. So increasing housing is one, but I think maybe slowing down office development until we get this back in balance is something that we need to consider.
Thank you. Diane?
Thank you. I agree with the comments that have been made. We have a major discrepancy here. 16 to 1, 16 jobs for every one housing unit. The solution is we need more inventory. So I'm happy to report, as of this afternoon, Redwood City is taking a very proactive role in building housing. As part of the Heart Board, we just approved a loan to Rome Properties at 353 Main Street, which will provide 125 apartment units at varying income levels, 60% of which will be below market rate to the low and moderate income. And this is what Redwood City can be doing. We can be doing below market rate housing while corporations can build the market rate housing. We have to pay attention to leveling the playing field and building more housing.
Thank you. Christina?
Here's a sobering number for you. So we have Stanford, and I'm nothing against Stanford. That's a 1.5 million square foot office space, okay? Our own Nexus study, that a project that size of office, they are supposed to provide 2,775 housing units. We have 0. If they don't provide the housing units, then we are supposed to have $25 per square footage, which is $60 million in affordable housing alone. We received nothing from a project that size. We have to. If we are going to approve projects that size, we must demand of our developers to either produce the housing or at least give us the money.
Thank you. And Diana, you've been waiting patiently. Thank you.
So many of you know perhaps that I am a housing advocate, and I do encourage landlords to set aside 10 to 15% of their units for low and middle income residents. One of our city council members had suggested, because we're having entire buildings being displaced with either evicted or getting $500,000 rent increases that they cannot sustain. And the suggestion was that we have a public list of bad actors. I suggest that we have a public list of good actors, those landlords that really support our residents and really support our community. I'd also like to call out, though I'm very proud of our city council for attempting to support our renters with the renter protection ordinances they adopted this spring, there are major flaws in those ordinances, so they will not be protecting renters at the level that they should be protecting them. And so I would really like to take another look at those ordinances.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to the next topic because we do have a lot of questions people have submitted. So this won't be the very last question about housing, though. If we can move through the other ones. So moving on to the next question, this is for you, Jason. And the topic is the city sales tax measure. Economists say sales taxes are regressive because people living paycheck to paycheck spend every dollar they make, whereas wealthier people split their income between spending and savings, and only their spending is subjected to sales tax. As one of the strongest voices endorsing Redwood City's sales tax measure during this campaign, what do you say to people who argue this will disproportionately impact the city's poorest residents?
It's a great question. So on the sales tax, I would say that in an emergency, whether you're rich or you're poor, no matter what neighborhood you live in, you're going to need the emergency services to show up at your door on time. The reason I support the sales tax is because we need to preserve our emergency services at all costs. We also need to stave off cuts to our library services at our parks. And in our libraries, so many of our kids who go to schools, the library is their form of internet. That's their source of accessing the internet. It bridges a critical digital divide that so many of our students rely on every single day. So it is a cost that is borne by our entire community. The vast majority of our sales tax dollars come from auto sales. So when we're looking at what's going to be funding our emergency services, those are generally, the bulk of that is coming from one-time large expenses. And again, this is a cost that is borne by the entire community, but is also a benefit that benefits the entire community. These services are services that Redwood City residents deserve. They've rightfully come to expect. Our fire department has received the highest possible rating for the quality of the service in the country that exists. There are only a few hundred departments in the country that have actually received that rating. So this is something I support, and I support strongly because the residents of Redwood City deserve that when you need these guys, they're going to show up to your door on time, no matter who you are.
Great, thank you. Anyone else on the sales tax? Diane, you voted for the sales tax as a member of City Council to put it on the ballot. What do you to say to people who argue that this disproportionately affects the poor?
Oh, thank you. I did have my finger going up as you said that. We had a great deal of discussion about this, and honestly, it's one of the several things that the city is going to do. At this time, we have an unfunded pension liability that is astronomical. PERS made some very poor investments back in 2009. And they also made some very bad projections. And that left cities and all school districts in California hurting at this point, because now we have pensions of people who have already retired, and we're legally obligated to pay that down. So one of the things we're doing is the half-cent sales tax. We've also raised our fees for service for businesses. We've also been entrepreneurial, offered our services to cities like San Carlos and San Bruno and East Palo Alto for IT services and repair of trucks and cars. So we're making money in that regard. We'll have a transit occupancy tax on the ballot in 2020. And we also have the sales tax measure. And most importantly, all 6 bargaining units in Redwood City have agreed to pay down their upcoming pension for the future. They're contributing to their health and their pension benefits so that we don't get in a predicament like this ever again.
Thank you. Diana?
So when we're talking about things being regressive, I just want to paint that picture a little bit. We're talking about I'm not an enthusiastic supporter of the sales tax. We are talking about our sales tax in Redwood City. The county is talking about a transportation tax, and we're talking about raising the bridge tolls. And our lowest income residents, who were former residents, are now living in Stockton and Vallejo and Tracy, and they're coming across those bridges. So that's the picture of what regressive looks like for our low-income residents. And I will vote for this sales tax. I don't see any way of not voting for the sales tax because I really don't want to jeopardize Redwood City's future. But it's important for us to paint that picture of what a sales tax means for some of our residents.
Thank you. Rick?
I do also support the sales tax because our budget difficulties right now are stemming from fixed contractual liabilities owed to people who are already retired, as the Vice Mayor said, or soon to be retired under the old pension system. I do wish that there had been more public input on considering other types of taxes because the sales tax is regressive and it hits the poor most heavily. I know that the city staff did consider other taxes like a head tax or a business tax, but I wish there had been more public input about that as opposed to just the sales tax. I also wish that the council had voted to put a sunset date on this because the pension liabilities that we have are long-term, but they're not indefinite. They are projected to peak and be high for about 15 to 20 years. So I would have preferred that. But given that what is on the ballot, I do think that in order to avoid $8 million a year of cuts, we need to approve the sales tax.
Ernie?
Thank you. And I will agree with Rick that I do wish that there was a sunset clause on that, and as well as that there was more public comment for that. But fact is, we are hurting. This pension deficit is just kicking us in the rear, and it's going to double within the next 10 years. And we think that our police officers are just there, and they are. And we're very lucky to have, I think, one of the best police departments in the nation. But the fact is they do get sick. They do get injured. The department calls them in from their vacations because they're understaffed. And the last thing I would want for you or for my family is when you make that call, you need to know that they're going to be there in the right amount of time to answer your call, to save your life, to handle whatever's going on in your life without you having to worry that there's not enough officers out there in the street.
Thank you. Giselle?
So I would echo all the reasons Jason stated for why it's important that we pass this tax. But Winston Churchill used to say, never waste a good crisis. And I think that's where we are. We need to be thinking differently about government now and in the future, about how we operate, about the efficiencies, and about how we find sustainable sources of revenue. I'm in favor of adding additional technology because it will not require a pension. We should have chatbots. We should have all the same services that great companies that you rely on use to scale their services across a number of people. Second is we should increase the shared service contracts that Vice Mayor Howard mentioned, which will help us not only to bring in additional revenues, but to reduce costs. And I do want to make a note about the headcount tax. It was not studied in depth. It was mentioned. Mountain View is currently they are actually moving forward with passing a headcount tax. I have discussed this with Mayor Siegel. I am watching it with interest. I think a reasonable headcount tax is absolutely something we should look at. I'm also a pragmatist, and that would be very difficult to pass in the timeline that the City Council had. So I do support the sales tax, and I hope you will as well.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to the next topic. And Diana, this is for you. The topic is rent control. Diana, last I checked, you're the only candidate on this stage who supports rent control, also called rent stabilization by supporters. While the short-term appeal of rent control to renters is clear, a big part of policymaking is looking years, even decades, into the future. How do you respond to people who say enacting rent control, rent stabilization, or similar renter protections undermines future investment in housing and leads to housing shortages in the long run?
What a great question for me. So the words rent control are very divisive. That's first. In California, we have Costa-Hawkins, which kind of restricted rent control. So we don't have that classic rent control that historically existed in New York, where rents were actually capped. We don't have that. We have rent stabilization, which says that each community can decide what kinds of ordinance they want to establish in order to stabilize rents. And in recent campaigns, that has been the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. And it's making, in my view, it's saying that homeowners, every year, they know that their property taxes are going to go up 2%. And at the time Prop 13 was passed, renters were told, support this because it's going to benefit you. Well, of course it didn't. And now they're getting 30%, 50%, 100% rent increases. And so the reality is that in San Francisco and in those cities that have some kind of stabilized rent, those communities are stable. They're people who have been in their units for many years, and that's the way it used to be when we could afford housing. We used to be in our units for decades, and that's what people are experiencing in those communities that have it. So because of Costa-Hawkins, the single-family homes are exempt. And new construction, thank you, new construction is exempt. It only pertains to buildings that are newer than 1995, that we're building, anything built after 1995 is exempt. And I actually agree with many of the issues in Costa-Hawkins. I just felt like it was an overreach to say that all the states should be observing this when each municipality should decide what is good for them.
Great, thank you. Rick?
I have to say that I do not support rent control for the reason that it's been demonstrated not to work. One of my favorite economists is Paul Krugman. Yes, I actually do have a favorite economist. And he has said that one of the few things that all economists agree on, and I'm sure it's not actually all, but one of the few things that economists do agree on is that rent control does not work. There was a recent Stanford University study that observed as sort of a natural experiment in San Francisco. It was a study about rent control, and the conclusion was that it benefited some tenants, those who were directly affected, whose rents were capped, but it almost to the same degree disadvantaged other tenants who were not by units being taken off the market. So.
Thank you. Christina?
Wouldn't it be nice if we had a need-based rent control? If you're in an apartment building and you can prove to that property owner that property owner is legally allowed to ask you for your W-2 every single year. So if you're making $300,000, $400,000 a year, guess what? You're not paying $1,200 a month. But if you're that teacher or that nurse or a rookie police officer and you're making $50,000, $60,000 a year, then you qualify for the $1,200 a month. And I would love to be able to see if we can move towards a need-based rental agreement over necessarily a rent control. I do agree with Diana that rent control is a very divisive word and kind of stops conversation. But I think we do have solutions, and a need-based would be one of them.
Thank you. Any other takers, or did that stop this conversation? Okay, Giselle, go ahead.
I completely agree with the research and the economic studies. I didn't have a strong opinion on rent control when I came into this election, and when we learned it was going to be a big topic, I did a lot of research. Spoke to a lot of people, read a lot of the similar studies that Rick cited, also an economics freak, and learned it's economically undisputed. It basically, rent control takes the housing crisis and turns it into a game of musical chairs, where two people get chairs and the rest are left to fight it out. When the real solution is to just add more chairs. And that's exactly why we come back to this discussion around supply and how we add more supply. Now, I do believe the status quo isn't working. If you are a renter in Redwood City today and your rent continues to go up, that is urgent. that has to be addressed with some urgency. And that's why I am supportive of the renter protections the City Council passed. I also believe we don't set rules and then forget them. We should be revisiting this to make sure that they're having the desired and intended outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane?
Something that also hasn't been mentioned is the fact that we have many older buildings in Redwood City that are multi-unit apartment buildings. Now, what I see happening is the cost of trying to rehab these buildings is so prohibitive, they're easily sold to someone from the outside who's going to immediately raise the rents. So what Redwood City has done is start a program recognizing that, I believe it's the year 2021 or 22, older buildings must be sprinklered. And it costs a lot of money to do that. So we have a rehab program that we are providing low to no interest loans in return for deed restrictions to keep the units affordable. So not only do we need to build new housing stock with a focus on below market rate, we also need to work on our older buildings and maintain them and rehab them to a point where we have deed restrictions and keep our affordable housing.
Thank you. Okay, well, Jason, go ahead.
Thank you, Brian. As a renter, I really want to support rent control. I really do. I mean, it sounds great. If you could have the same rent for a long period of time, that would be amazing. But unfortunately, the reality is it just doesn't work. We've seen so much empirical evidence, and you only need to look to our neighbors in San Francisco to see that housing is far from stable. It's great if you have it, but if you don't, what it means is that you're going to have fewer options, fewer places to move into, and that your rent is actually going to be higher if you don't have a rent control unit. And so I really want to support it, but I think there are better options. I was a proud proponent, like Giselle mentioned, of the renter protection measures, the minimum lease terms, which means you have stability in your lease, the relocation assistance, so that if your apartment gets redeveloped, that you have some peace of mind knowing you have 3 months worth of rent. But the fact is, it just does not work, and in fact, probably exacerbates the problem for many renters.
Thank you. We're going to move to the next question. And Rick, this is for you. The subject is local schools. You have made helping local schools part of your campaign platform. But as a planning commissioner in 2017, you were one of 3 votes against the proposed rocket ship school, which would have built a new charter school in the Redwood Village neighborhood. If approving rocket ship wasn't the right way to help local schools, what do you propose city government should do to help local schools?
Thanks for that question. So first I should address the vote about rocket ship. That was a controversial and it was a very difficult decision. I agonized on that decision for weeks, and I visited the site many times. That site ultimately came down to the question of safety. As a parent of 3 children who've gone through all the local public schools, one of the most important thing that you want for your children is for them to be safe, and that includes when they're walking to and from school. That's the non-negotiable. This project, I wanted to support this project because the school, Rocket Ship School, wanted it, and the Redwood City School District that sponsors it also wanted that. Dr. John Baker, the superintendent, asked if we would support that. But ultimately, it came down to the fact that it was not safe, that there were too many trucks. This is in a light industrial area, and there were trucks entering and exiting their driveways during the morning rush hour especially. And I felt that if we approved that and a child was seriously hurt by one of those trucks, I would never forgive myself. So that's the answer to that part of the question. As far as what the city can do for local schools, most of you are probably aware that the school district is a whole separate jurisdiction. It's a separate entity, so the city council does not have authority over it. But there are some things we can do, and I believe that our city is closer to its school district than many others are. When I was meeting with Dr. Baker, and I've also met with trustees from, all of the trustees actually, from the high school district as well as the elementary district, I got the same question a couple times, and that is, when the city negotiates with the, does it ever negotiate on behalf of the school district? And I didn't know the answer, so I talked to people, and it turns out that, in fact, most of the time we don't. So one of the things I want to do is have the city negotiate with developers either on behalf of the district or invite the school district, the high school, and the elementary districts to be part of those negotiations.
Thank you. Ernie, you raised your hand.
So I'm not going to let my friend Rick here take the entire blame for Rockets, because I was obviously on the planning commission when that decision was made, and to his point, that was actually the toughest decision I've actually ever made on the planning commission dais, for the reasons that Rick had stated. And when you're out there looking at the property and you're seeing all those big trucks traveling back and forth and going through those streets, there's just no way that as a planning commissioner I could have approved such a project. But you couldn't help at the same time be inspired by all these great kids, especially that young lady, and I can't remember what her name was, who spoke so eloquently. So that was a tough decision. But as council members, even though that we're not part of it, we have great, I know I do, and I think most of us do, have great relationships with our school board, and we just have to try to find ways to continue to work with them and with the parents and community members.
Thank you. Diana? Diana, yes, ready.
I mentioned that I worked for the Sequoia Union High School District, and in that capacity, I was generally speaking not a supporter of charter schools, because it was my view that charter schools often were creating private schools with public money. There have been a couple of charter schools, both through the Sequoia District and the Redwood City School District, that I think are doing a really fine job. But the principle, I think, needs to be that if it's going to be a charter school, it needs to be serving a wide variety of students and not just, a specific targeted group of students. I completely agree with Rick that the city is actually working closer with our school districts than most cities do, and I'm really proud of that. And I experienced that when I was working in the Sequoia District, that we worked with city council members at that time, and yeah, I look forward to that experience myself.
Thank you. Diane?
I totally respect the decision by the Planning Commission, and then the decision was appealed and it came to the City Council. And I also voted not to put rocket ship in a light industrial area for the same reasons that were mentioned before. What I did do is meet with Innovate. Innovate is the umbrella organization that oversees charter schools. And I made a suggestion that with declining enrollment in our Redwood City School District, classrooms being emptied, that there might be an opportunity to share space. It wasn't received well, but I'm going to keep trying to work in that direction, because I feel one group has space or needs space, the other one has available space, and for the time being, why don't we share and work well together? It's what I'm hoping will happen. Redwood City offers many after-school opportunities, park and recreation programs, and library programs. We're trying to support our schools in the best way we can by providing increased services for our children.
Giselle?
I'm a public education advocate. I am a board member of the Redwood City Education Foundation. I worked to pass Measures T and U. My kids aren't even in the district yet. They'll start next year. If I'm elected, I will be the only person with kids in our public schools on the City Council. Our schools matter to me a great deal. Unlike my colleagues, I voted to support Rocket Ship because I know as a parent, parents never put their children in harm's way. And I believed those parents when they said this was a life-changing opportunity for their children. My ticket out of poverty was an education, and I know how much that matters. I believe the big idea that we haven't talked about yet around schools is keeping our teachers here. Teacher housing, teacher and staff housing, and we can make it a reality. School districts are experts at educating kids. Cities are experts at planning and land use. Developers know how to build. We should come together around a solution for city housing. It can be a reality in Redwood City. It would help our schools, and it would help our teachers. And I think that's one of the biggest ideas we need to talk more about.
Thank you. Jason?
I was not on the planning commission or, of course, the city council at the time, but if I were, I would have voted to support the rocket ship project. If the street was unsafe, As a city council and as a planning commission for that matter, we have an obligation to make that street safe regardless of whether there's a school there or not. And secondly, I don't see it as the city council's choice to adjudicate whether charter schools are appropriate for a school district or not. It's the purview of the school district. Our job is to assess the land use and build accordingly. So I also want to echo Giselle's point that we certainly need to look more at teacher housing. I mentioned earlier, I was raised here at a time where a teacher could afford to buy a home here in Redwood City, and that needs to remain the case. I had the opportunity to visit Kenyatta College and see the faculty and staff housing up there. It is beautiful. It's an incredible community where people feel connected to each other and to their work. And I work on getting housing approved for professors and our faculty and grad students. That is work I'd like to build on the City Council.
Thank you. Go ahead, Christina. All right, we're going to go to the next question. And Ernie, this is for you. And the topic is development. Many Redwood City residents feel the city has grown too much, too fast. You've said you're running to bring the people's voice back to City Hall. Yet you've also said Redwood City needs to build more housing to address affordability. How would you represent residents at City Hall who want to put a pause on any more development?
So, development is going to slow down naturally as it is right now. Construction costs are rising. Lawsuits are on an increase. For developers, it's becoming a little bit more difficult all the time as we move toward the future to develop properties. Yes, absolutely. I do believe that in order to mitigate the affordable housing crisis that we have, we do have to build more housing. And I've talked about the El Camino corridor as a great option to do that. Fact is, the downtown precise plan was a 15 to 20 year project. And if everybody remembers, I don't know if it was a Sunday morning or a Monday morning, and we all woke up, especially for those who weren't involved that much in the process of the downtown precise plan, which was a long span of planning. We woke up to 6 or 7 cranes in downtown, and we asked ourselves, what the heck is going on here? We grew too fast, and looking back, when somebody asked me if, as a planning commissioner, what kind of a tool could I have in order to make a better planning commissioner, would be a crystal ball. If you could actually predict what could have happened and how fast we would have grown, I actually would have put stopping points to be able to figure out where we were at that time, and to be able to figure out, hey, how's the infrastructure going? Where are we at with traffic? Where are we at with housing? What's going on? So we would be better able to plan. But this next phase is going to require, and I think we woke up to sleeping giant. I can almost assure you that most of you who were surprised by the downtown precise plan are going to be highly involved in the next process as we look for in the future. And we're going to let you determine what direction we need to go to. You can't put a stop on growth. Growth is going to happen in one form or another. And walking neighborhoods, I do hear the moratorium thing come up every so often, but I don't think that's honestly a possibility. But I definitely want to involve everybody in regards to the next process. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason?
I agree with Ernie that we can do a better job of reaching out to residents and hearing their concerns. I'm a big proponent of getting out early with the project so that we can make sure that the concerns of the community are incorporated into design so that we don't come up to the approval process and then we just for the first time hear about a concern, and that just delays the project once and it creates lots of loss for our city and for our community. And I very much want to see more housing, and I said the question is where do we put it and how do we do it appropriately? I would like us to see growth of housing located near transit, near the train, so that people have an alternative to driving alone to work. It does not belong out in the salt ponds. I don't believe that housing should be built at any cost. Developing the Cargill site, as difficult as it is to turn down the much needed homes, we should not be filling in the bay and preventing such, having the loss of such an incredible natural habitat for our community.
Thank you. Rick?
When I'm asked about growth, which is the most common thing that we're probably all asked about when we are meeting people, the first thing that I have to say is that growth is inevitable. And it's nothing that we can do as a community to stop it. The Bay Area is projected to grow by 2 million people by 2040. And if you take that as a given, then that informs your decisions. So I think if we do take that as a given, the growth will happen. The question is, how do we manage it? And we need to manage it in a balanced way so that we welcome new families in the best, most logical areas to put new apartments while keeping the character of our current neighborhoods. And that is important to keep that. So there is a balance, and we can do both. And putting much of the growth in higher density places like downtown and along El Camino and major thoroughfares seems to make the most sense, because that's where traffic can be the impacts on traffic and parking can be minimized.
Thank you. Christina.
So I consider growth a little bit like growing your family. And I think if we took the analogy of having quadruplets, and when that fourth one is born, and you look at your spouse and you say, I'm going to do it again, let's do this again, we can all probably agree that that would be a little crazy. And I think that's what we're doing when we fulfill the downtown precise plan and we say, let's open it up. To me, the natural caps that we put in place in 2011 is a natural spot for us to take a pause and to reevaluate what we need and to see what we need. And we need to respect that. That's number one. Number two, we need to work on our infrastructure. We can't look to the future and to build more when we don't have the infrastructure to support what we have right now. So I would look at that, and to Jason's point, and to most everybody else's, to build along transit, we have to look at our zonings, our mixed use and our light industrial and industrial restricted zonings, which all fall in that. Thank you.
Giselle?
So not to pander, but we did just have a VOCA question on this today that many of you responded to. And it was interesting because it did reflect what I hear at the doors, which is a very mixed view. It was a split response. And if you read the comments, you do get this sense that residents are grappling with some of what you've heard here. The trade-off, the need for housing, but the need to balance that with infrastructure and parking and transit solutions. And that's the essence of the challenge. I think that we have learned a lot through the Downtown Precise Plan, and we should be doing what we would tell any of our children to do, which is learn from your mistakes, get better. We have a lot of lessons there. You know, the Downtown Precise Plan, if you sit down with some of the original council members who worked on it, they never thought it would execute this quickly. So maybe introduce the notion of phasing. Certainly have a robust discussion about what the future would look like for growth in Redwood City. But the notion of a precise plan is actually a very powerful tool, and certainly one that I think we should revisit in the future. And I really do believe that if we build more housing, we will bend the price curve. So if you are for lower housing prices, then you do need to be for growth.
Thank you. Diane?
Thank you. I'm so glad we had a downtown precise plan when the economy went boom. Otherwise, we would have been reactive instead of proactive. However, nobody expected it to happen that quickly, and that's why I'm so pleased we put caps on our housing and our office and hotel and retail. Michael Friedman said, don't mess with your caps. Don't let the economy change your plan. And I followed that religiously. I think that if we're going to look at the downtown precise plan, we do it cautiously and with a robust community input. It took us almost 2 years of community input to put this downtown precise plan together. There's no reason we shouldn't be doing that again. I do want to build more housing. I think the downtown and El Camino corridor are perfect places for that. But again, I want to have a robust community conversation around it before we move forward on some of these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina?
Yeah, so two things had been brought up. One, building on salt ponds, and two, building more houses to actually bring down the cost of homes. Salt ponds should be off the table. But the interesting part is salt ponds, they were supposed to be 10 to 12,000 luxury homes. That doesn't help us keep our property values down. All that does is increase our property values. It increases the prices for people to start out here. So yes, we need new homes and we need more inventory, but we have to be smart in what we put out there. It can't be $4 or $5 million homes. They have to be in the $1 million range. Unfortunately, that's the low side, but we have to. Thank you.
Thank you. Ernie?
Real quick, because Diane Howard had just brought something out about a downtown precise plan. I should have brought that up earlier. Just a quick fact. Prior to the downtown precise plan being created, you would have been able to build 3,300 units in our downtown area. They dropped it down to 2,500 units. In regards to office space, you would have been able to build up to 921,000 square feet worth of office space. They dropped that down to 275,000. So imagine just for 1 second if the downtown precise plan would not have been created. Trust me, when we were door knocking, you would have been after the candidates or your council members even more. So I just wanted to throw that out there right quick.
Thank you. And Diana?
So just to put a little bit different spin on this, I think that in addition to our being smart about planning and growth, we need to be smart about the developers we bring into our community. Indigo is one of our new apartment buildings. Currently their studios are $3,800. Their 2 bedrooms are $7,400, and they have a penthouse for $32,000 a month. Indigo was not built for us. It was not built for our residents. It was not built for our community. And so when I worked for the Sequoia District, we had a list of developers that had been pre-approved. We knew that we could depend on them to be under budget and to come in within the time frame that they said that they would. We also knew that they were building for us, and we knew what kind of what we could expect from them. And that's what I would like for us to look at in Redwood City.
All right, I'm going to wrap the question there. Tom has given me the signal that it is time for closing statements. For closing statements, we will go in reverse order from opening statements. So Ernie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us here. I know many of you have got a lot of stuff on your plate in regards to work, kids, family, the works. But I wanted to first also thank all of you, because you have 7 candidates here that have been knocking on your doors. And trust me, I do get those looks. Oh, another one, another one. But thank you. You've been so patient. Some of you, my wife is here. You've met my wife. She's been knocking on doors. You've invited us into your homes for water, even lunch. So thank you. And that's what Redwood City's about. When my wife and I first moved to Redwood City 17 years ago, I never would have imagined that I'd be so incredibly active, not only within my own community, but regionally, where I have proudly served on a county committee, or statewide, where I currently serve on a policy committee as vice president of the Planning and Development Committee for the League of California Cities. But the reality is I did fall in love with making a difference for our community. This is not a pit stop for me for higher office for me. This is about me wanting to give back and making a difference as a council member for as long as you'll have me. I didn't just start getting involved 2 or 3 or 6 months ago. I have been involved in my community for the last 10 years nonstop. When you really get to the heart of what is the true objective of a council member, it's to be the voice of the community. And right now that voice is lost in City Hall. And I believe that my experience, knowledge, and reputation will find that voice again. So when that ballot comes in, I'm number 6 on the ballot. Please check that off, and I humbly ask for your support. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ernie. Rick?
I also want to thank you all for being out here and for being so involved in your community that you are spending your night with us. So we have 7 strong candidates running in this election. What sets me apart from the other candidates? A couple things distinguish me. First, my long and extensive volunteer experience and civic experience gives me deep roots in the community. I've served together with a wide variety of people from all walks of life, and I know the community. This experience has also taught me how to work closely with others to solve our problems. I'm very proud that of nearly all of the planning commissioners, the parks and recreation commissioners, and the board members that I have served with are strongly supporting me, because they know how I collaborate and how I listen and make decisions with them. The second thing that distinguishes me is my financial experience. As I outlined earlier on, I am a CPA and have been for my whole career. The council has had CPAs serve in the past, and that's been a very valuable asset for the community. I'll bring this experience and ability to analyze budgets and safeguard your money. Finally, when Mayor Ian Main endorsed me, we asked if he could give us a quote that we could use, and he gave us a wonderful one. In the quote, the first word he used to describe me was kind. And that's not a word you hear often in politics these days. But I hope it will be, because that's the way I will approach my job as a city council member. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Diana?
Thank you so much for tonight's opportunity for you all to get to know us a little bit better. Several years ago, I participated in the Redwood City piece of the UC Berkeley Urban Displacement Study. The conclusion of that study was, should the city succeed in its economic development goals, there will be a mismatch between housing supply and job growth that will go against the core of sustainable development. That's exactly what we're experiencing now. In 5 years, we have seen the build out of a 20-year development plan. The Downtown Precise Plan did not include mechanisms to prevent the mismatch that occurred, and did not provide the affordability levels desperately needed by our community. In my view, we have undervalued ourselves in not seeking community benefits that would truly benefit our community. We can do better than this. I'll leave you with a thought that is the core of who I am. Of those to whom much is given, much is required. I'm very clear about what's required of me. I'm housing and economically secure, and it's important for me to support those who are not. There are 7 members of our city council. Residents deserve to have at least one of those seats covered by someone who has a particular sensitivity to the most vulnerable in our community. I humbly ask you to vote for me, Diana Reddy, so those without a voice will have a seat at the table.
Thank you, Diana. Jason?
Thank you so much, Brian, and the VOCA team, to PCC. Gary, thank you so much for having us tonight, and for all of you for taking the time out of your evening to come learn about all of our vision for Redwood City. So I grew up here in Redwood City. Redwood City is my home, and I love the Redwood City of my childhood, and I'm excited by what our future has in store. We do have a vision for a community in which we can all have a place here and live here affordably, where we can get around town safely and efficiently, where we have incredible schools, and where our services are funded at their full levels. We've seen a lot of changes in the past few years. Many of them have happened far faster than we could have imagined. And it's brought with it many challenges and many opportunities. And we must take great care to ensure that the vision that we craft is crafted together, that it's one that takes care to mitigate its impacts and lead us to a future in which everyone can share in the prosperity that is being created right here at home. I'm deeply invested in making the vision a reality. Redwood City is where I have chosen to build my life for myself and for my partner. It's where I hope to buy a home someday. It's where I hope to raise a family. I'm here to stay, and I want to shape the future of our community together with you. And I humbly ask for your support. Number 7 on your ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Christina?
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, members of the community, for coming out tonight. Before I go on with my written closing statement, I want to thank my husband and sons for being here. My sons are in high school, so their homework is a little bit harder and a little more time consuming. But with them is Yaja. And Yaja has been with me since the 2nd grade. She was one of the single moms that were part of the micro community that I lived with on Hudson Street. So I want to thank you for coming. So now I can read. I was born and raised in Redwood City, and my roots in this town are deep and wide. I attended and graduated from Hawes, Kennedy, and Woodside, and owned, along with my husband, a 2nd-generation family business, Fred's Garage. My family is here, my friends are here, my business is here, our property is here, and my heart is here. I have no intention of becoming a career politician or using this as a stepping stone to a higher office. City Council is the only elected office I will seek in my lifetime. I have no desire to seek a county, state, or federal seat. For that reason, I am only beholden to the interest of residents, my neighbors, my friends, and my family. I work hard, I do my homework thoroughly, and do what is right for the people who live and work in Redwood City. No special interest, corporations, or developers have donated to my campaign, and I like it that way. I am putting each and every one of you who live and work in this great town first whenever I make a decision. I think about how any decision I make will negatively impact or benefit you. That is my bottom line. I humbly ask that you vote for me, Christina Umhofer, for Redwood City City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Giselle?
I want to start by saying thank you to you, Brian, for all your work to collaborate with us. Tom, timekeeper's the toughest gig up here. And to Pastor Gary for opening up your home to us here today. So this next council will face many challenges, some that we discussed here today, some that are unknown. We need thoughtful, intelligent, hardworking, and compassionate leaders to navigate our city through change. My husband and I chose Redwood City as the place to start our family because of the values that matched our own. Redwood City is diverse, it's inclusive, it's multi-generational. These are the values worth protecting, and this is what I would fight to protect on the City Council. To do that, we must make housing affordable for all, reduce the time we spend in traffic, preserve the neighborhoods we hold dear, and invest in our public schools. As mentioned, there are 7 great candidates. You get 3 votes. Here's why I'd like to ask you for one. I have the qualifications, experience, and the collaborative spirit to be successful in this role on day one. As a planning commissioner, I've sat at the dais, heard all sides, and made hard decisions. As a businesswoman with an MBA, I've built budgets, I've built large and successful teams, and I've found new sources of revenue, all things the city will need as we navigate this unfunded pension liability. As a working mom, I personally know the challenges of raising a family in Redwood City today. And finally, local government is a team sport. You don't get anything done without 4 votes. As a former NCAA Division I athlete, I know how to play on a team. I believe the best days are ahead of us, and that's what I would work for. A Redwood City where people of all ages, all incomes, and all backgrounds can thrive. So I humbly ask for your support for me, Giselle Hale, for the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Giselle. Diane?
Well, I'll echo the thank yous. Brian, Tom, Peninsula Covenant Church, thank you so very much for doing this and offering this opportunity. But especially thank you to all of you here. Your time is a precious gift, and I want to thank you for coming here this evening and getting to know each and every one of us better. We are at a unique point in Redwood City as a community. We're about to have a significant leadership turnover, just as our community is facing challenges due to the growth around us. As I mentioned before, by the year 2020, our council will in 5 years. Redwood City has a $121 million budget with 550 plus employees that we manage day to day. My years of service, my deep understanding of our community, my direct experience with the most successful strategies and initiatives of our past will be critical during this time of change and transition. There's an added bonus when you vote for me. I'm a nurse, and I know CPR, and I know the Heimlich maneuver. And hopefully it's never needed on the dais or in the audience, but it is a bonus that's to be treasured. So I humbly ask for your support as I run for the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. And thank you to all the candidates for the very rich discussion we've had and for sharing your visions for our great city. To those of you at home and those of you in the audience, thank you for spending your evening with us tonight. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th, but your ballots will arrive in your mailboxes later this week. I would now like to close the event by asking everyone to join me in a warm round of applause for our 7 candidates.
We're flying up, no ceiling.